Hi, my name is Rowena. My voice caught a nervous tremor betraying the forced cheerfulness I was attempting. It was my brother Blake's birthday. A day that was supposed to be about celebration, about family. Instead, it became a stark reminder of my diminishing place within it. They handed me a faded, stained apron, a silent uniform in their carefully orchestrated festivities, then with a casual cruelty that still chills me, they erased me from every single memory they captured that day. Each forced smile in their sun-drenched photos felt like a shard of glass twisting in my gut. But even worse than being visibly left out, a ghost haunting the edges of their joy, was the sickening realization that this wasn't a sudden act of exclusion. No, this had been a slow, insidious erosion years in the making. I had foolishly believed I was painstakingly building a bridge back to them, brick by fragile brick, only to discover they were deliberately, callously burning it behind me, the smoke stinging my eyes with unshed tears. Before we dive into the heart of the story, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where are you from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story too. The road ahead unspooled like a discarded ribbon, twisting through the oppressive density of the trees. Their leaves, a suffocating canopy overhead, cast long skeletal shadows that danced across the cracked asphalt like mocking fingers. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel, a desperate attempt to loosen the vice-like tension that had already seized every muscle in my body. In the passenger seat, a small pathetic bag rustled the neck of a bottle of red wine peeking out, a last-minute foolish offering, a ridiculous ember of hope I couldn't quite extinguish. Then the lake house materialized through the trees, a cold architectural marvel that stole my breath and sent an involuntary jolt of something akin to dread through my heart. It was stunning, yes, in that sterile, untouchable way. Magazine spreads, often our floor-to-ceiling windows, that gleamed with an almost hostile brilliance in the sun. A meticulously manicured deck that cascaded down to the glittering, indifferent waters of Trillium Lake. Strings of fairy lights, like captured fireflies, floated between the ancient trees, and a parade of gleaming luxury SUVs choked the gravel driveway, a testament to a world I no longer inhabited. I parked near the tree line, feeling every inch the outsider arriving late and unwanted to someone else's lavish party. A desperate whisper of, "Maybe this time will be different," flickered within me, a fragile moth drawn to a dangerous flame. Maybe showing up still matters. I didn't have a spare second to kill that naive thought before the front door was flung open with dramatic flair. My mother, Darlene, descended the porch steps, each click of her crisp heels against the wood echoing like a judge's gavel. Her navy dress was immaculate, the pearls around her neck catching the sunlight with every sharp, decisive movement. Her face, however, was a carefully constructed mask. No welcoming smile, no rush to embrace me. Instead, she marched toward my car, something black and shapeless, dangling ominously from her hand. I forced my lips into something approximating a smile, the muscles in my face protesting the unnatural curve. "Hi, Mom." I managed the word, feeling brittle and inadequate, without a word, without even making eye contact. She thrust the black apron into my hands. Bold white letters screamed the word staff across the front, a brand of humiliation. "We're short on servers," she said breezily, as if bestowing a grand favor rather than delivering a stinging insult. "Be a darling and help out, would you?" Behind her, Ashton, the birthday king himself, sauntered onto the porch, a champagne flute dangling precariously from 2 fingers. He sported a cheap plastic crown emblazoned with Birthday King in obnoxious glitter. His already wide grin stretched even further, a predatory display. The moment he saw me clutching the offensive apron, "Don't trip, Rowena," he called out, his voice laced with a cruel amusement that sent a fresh wave of heat flooding my face. "Mom would hate for you to ruin the vibe." My hands, despite the boiling rage within me, acted on autopilot. I tied the stiff, scratchy fabric of the apron around my waist, the coarse material, a physical manifestation of my unwelcome presence. "Smile, nod, get through it," I chanted silently, a pathetic mantra against the rising tide of despair. The inside of the house hummed with the smooth, almost arrogant hum of wealth, the delicate clinking of crystal glasses, the practiced cadence of polite laughter, the mellow, forgettable thump of background jazz. The kitchen counters groaned under the weight of artfully arranged trays of catered hors d'oeuvres, and white-coated servers, sleek and efficient, glided through the clusters of guests like well-trained phantoms. Except for me, I awkwardly balanced a tray of sparkling water on my arm and navigated through the throng. Nobody looked at me twice. Not as family, not even as someone worthy of a casual greeting. I was background noise. A piece of unwanted furniture in their perfectly curated tableau. Halfway around the expansive deck, a trio of Darlene's impeccably dressed friends flagged me down near the crackling fire pit. Their ostentatious jewelry caught the dying rays of the sun, sparkling with cold indifference as they lifted their glasses in my general direction. "You're Ashton's sister, right?" one of them asked, her voice dripping with a rehearsed warmth that didn't reach her eyes. I nodded, shifting the heavy tray higher on my hip. "And what do you do now, dear?" My mouth opened, ready to tell them about the thriving event planning business I had painstakingly built town, the 6-figure contracts I had successfully closed, the high-profile corporate retreats I had organized from the ground up, but the words never made it past the lump forming in my throat. Darlene, ever the master of appearances, swooped in her voice, suddenly syrupy with a false sweetness that made my teeth ache. "Rowena? Oh, she organizes cute little birthday parties, bake sales, small stuff." The women tittered behind their expensive glasses, exchanging glances of thinly veiled pity. Something cracked quietly inside my chest. A tiny, almost imperceptible fracture. But it was there. A sharp, stinging pain. Nonetheless, I forced a stiff smile, mumbled an excuse, and retreated toward the deck railing, pretending a sudden fascination with the shimmering expanse of the lake. The sun was beginning its dramatic descent, painting the water in hues of molten gold and fiery orange. The gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, a bittersweet aroma that only amplified my sense of isolation. I gripped the railing until my fingers ached, willing the suffocating wave of embarrassment to drain from my body. Why had I even come? The question echoed in the hollow chambers of my heart. I knew better. I always knew better. Behind me, Ashton's voice rose above the polite murmuring of the crowd, loud enough for everyone to hear his cruel jest. "Hope she doesn't spill the drinks. Poor thing might drown in her own mess." A wave of laughter erupted, sharp and mocking, washing over me. I didn't turn, didn't react. I stared fixedly at the lake, the vibrant colors blurring at the edges as my vision prickled with unshed tears. It would have been so easy to laugh it off, to pretend it didn't matter, to play the role I had always been. Assigned the good daughter, the invisible sister, the family footnote. But somewhere deep inside, a voice old and weary whispered fiercely, "Not tonight." I slipped away from the railing, the echo of their laughter snapping at my back like a cruel whip. For the first time in a long time, I didn't swallow it down. I let the hurt sit there, real and heavy and undeniably mine. And somewhere within that raw ache, a tiny ember long dormant flared to life. The evening air had grown cooler now, and I wrapped my arms around myself, a futile attempt at comfort, as I leaned against the railing, pretending the burning sensation behind my eyes was merely from the crisp mountain breeze. Inside the house, the laughter had grown louder. Looser, the unrestrained mirth of people who never had to think twice about the casual cruelty of their words. My gaze remained fixed on the lake, its surface darkening as the last slivers of sunlight bled away. Somewhere inside, someone clinked a glass against a bottle, drawing a fresh burst of cheers. Then Ashton's voice cut through the noise, louder than the rest, dripping with mock sincerity. "Hey, don't forget to tip the help folks. Rowena could probably use it to pay her rent." A roar of laughter followed, sharp and cutting, slicing through the night air like a jagged blade. I froze, the world around me seeming to tilt precariously for a disorienting moment. The railing suddenly felt too far away, the earth too unsteady beneath my feet. My cheeks flamed with a heat so intense I thought they might spontaneously combust. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe, to remain upright, to deny them the spectacle they so clearly craved. Out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement caught my attention. A woman in a sophisticated navy cocktail dress, her hair swept up into an elegant chignon, teetered across the deck on impossibly spindly heels. She carried herself with the effortless grace of someone who belonged to the lake house itself, polished, untouchable. She stopped a few feet from me, a glassy, practiced smile plastered on her face. "Excuse me," she said, waving her empty wine glass like a conductor's baton. "Could you bring a few more napkins to the buffet? It's getting a little messy in there." It took a disorienting second for me to process that she was speaking to me. Not as a guest, not even as a distant relative, but as staff, the apron. The damn apron I had momentarily forgotten was tied around my waist, a scarlet letter of my perceived worthlessness. My mouth opened, the automatic apology rising unbidden, a lifetime of conditioning threatening to betray me. But something inside snapped a clean, decisive break. "I'm not with the catering," I said evenly, my voice sharper than I intended, a newfound steel lacing my tone. "You might want to ask someone else." Her smile faltered for a fleeting moment, a flicker of confusion in her eyes, then returned twice as brittle, "Oh well." She blinked as if struggling to reframe me in her limited worldview. Guest staff, some unfortunate in-between that made her uncomfortable. Without another word, she turned and retreated toward the boisterous warmth of the fire pit. I stood there, the old familiar shame creeping up my spine, a cold, unwelcome guest. But this time it was met with something else. Something angrier, something heavier, a simmering resentment that had finally found its voice. Invisible, that's what I had always been to them. Not important enough to remember, to honor, to celebrate, just convenient enough to use when they needed a warm body to fill a seat, to pour drinks to make the photos look complete. I pressed my hands against the rough wood of the railing until my palms ached, the silent mantra echoing in my head. "I'm not invisible, I'm not their servant." The words grew louder with each repetition, finally drowning out the residual echoes of their cruel laughter from inside. A fierce urge to flee, to rip off the offensive apron and hurl it at my mother's perfectly manicured feet, to walk out the front door without a backward glance, surged through me. I could almost taste the satisfaction of their stunned faces, the whispered gossip, the delicious scandal of it all. But the thought of leaving felt like a surrender, like admitting they were right about me, that I wasn't strong enough to stay in the room. I was bone tired of being the one who always left quietly, the ghost fading into the background. I inhaled slowly, drawing the cold night air deep into my lungs, and straightened my shoulders. If I left, it wouldn't be running. It would be a declaration. And if I stayed, it would be on my terms. The sliding glass door behind me groaned open. I didn't need to turn to know it was another guest or a family member seeking a momentary respite from the suffocating forced cheer inside. Their laughter, loud and unrestrained, spilled through the widening crack before the door slid shut again. I wiped my damp palms against the sides of my jeans, breathing steadily, preparing to head back inside to finish whatever this bizarre, humiliating night had become, if only to prove to myself that I could. But just as I turned, the unmistakable cutting edge of my mother's voice sliced through the murmuring night. "She's always been the difficult one, you know. That's just how Rowena is." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. A second voice, lower and unfamiliar, responded with a dismissive half-laugh. "Well, every family's got one." I stood there, my hand still gripping the railing, the distant stars blurring above me, the dark expanse of the lake forgotten at my back. The casual cruelty of their words embedded themselves deep beneath my skin like poisoned splinters. Difficult. Because I didn't shine the way Ashton did. Because I didn't bend to fit the narrow picture they had painted for me. Because I dared to want something different. Something better. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I simply stood there, a silent witness, as my mother's voice, so sweet and charming in public, so cutting and dismissive in private, ripped whatever fragile scraps of hope I still harbored into irreparable pieces. I slipped just inside the sliding door, pressing myself against the cool, smooth wall. The murmur of the party stretched around me like an invisible, suffocating web. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe too loudly. Ahead of me, tucked into the hallway near the brightly lit kitchen, stood my mother and my Aunt Lillian, Dad's sister, who always smelled faintly of vanilla and carried herself with the brittle dignity of someone intimately acquainted with disappointment. They hadn't seen me step inside. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to spare myself the inevitable pain of what was to come. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot, a moth drawn to a destructive flame, the words unspooling between them like a slow, poisonous drip. "She's always been so sensitive," Darlene said, her voice light, almost pitying a performance for Lillian's benefit. Honestly, it's exhausting. No matter what you do, it's never enough for her. Always brooding, always needing something. Aunt Lillian gave a low chuckle, the kind that slid under your skin and settled there like a persistent chill. Some kids are just born looking for a problem. Darlene sighed a dramatic sound so heavy it seemed to sag the very walls around us. At least Ashton knows how to make us proud, Rowena. She just craves attention, always has. It's like she can't stand not being the center of something. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, harder than any slap ever could. They stripped away the polite smiles, the occasional obligatory invitations, the hollow perfunctory hugs. They exposed the raw, ugly truth in a way I could no longer deny. It wasn't about tonight. It had never been about tonight. This was a deeply ingrained pattern woven into the very fabric of who we were, or more accurately, who they had decided I was allowed to be. I gripped the corner of the wall until my fingers ached, blinking hard against the sudden stinging tears that threatened to spill. Sensitive attention-seeking, a disappointment. The labels fell over me heavy and suffocating like a funeral shroud. Unbidden memories flashed through my mind, a cruel rapid-fire slideshow of a lifetime of being unseen. My high school graduation overshadowed by Ashton's crucial soccer tournament. My first major event contract barely acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, honey." Birthday after birthday, where their silence grew louder than any forced party noise could have been. They had never truly seen me, only the gaps I failed to fill, only the flaws they needed me to have so they wouldn't have to confront their own. I straightened slowly, the apron's ties, pulling uncomfortably against my ribs, a symbolic restraint. This wasn't just a uniform for tonight. It had been the uniform of my entire life. Serve, smile, be useful. Not important, be background, not headline. Their conversation drifted into other equally trivial matters. Someone's upcoming wedding, the exorbitant cost of redecorating the sunroom. But I wasn't listening anymore. Inside me something shifted, a small silent breakaway. A fault line opening up where years of forced loyalty had once resided. They never intended to see me. The realization wasn't sharp or sudden. It was cold, final, like stepping onto a frozen lake and hearing the first ominous crack echo underfoot. I didn't belong here. Maybe I never had. I pressed a hand flat against my chest, a desperate attempt to ground myself against the rising tide of sorrow and a fierce, unfamiliar anger. I wouldn't cry here, not for them. Not in a place where my pain would only become another anecdote for them to chuckle over after the catered plates were cleared. Outside, the laughter grew louder, swelling into a chaotic chorus. Someone must have announced the dreaded group photo. It was tradition after all. Capture the happy family frame. The perfect fiction. I swiped the back of my hand quickly across my face, straightened my shoulders, and forced a smile so practiced it almost didn't hurt. If they wanted a picture, I'd give them one, but not the version they expected. I stepped back into the evening air, just as the photographer, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and a clipboard tucked under his arm, called out, gathering everyone together on the sprawling deck. The deck lights had been turned on, casting a soft, deceptive glow over the assembled crowd. My footsteps fell in time with the sudden hush that settled over the group as they awkwardly arranged themselves. Darlene, ever the orchestrator, pulled Ashton to the center. Her laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. Others shifted to flank him, leaving noticeable gap spaces. I wasn't sure I was even meant to fill. I hesitated at the edge of the gathering, the cool night air prickling against my skin. Somewhere deep down, a voice I hadn't heard in years. A whisper of my true self insisted, "You don't have to stand where they tell you don't. You have to shrink." I took a slow, deliberate step forward, not toward the center, not toward the back where the unwanted are relegated, but to the side. From there, I could see them clearly, and more importantly, I could be seen if I chose to be. The flash of the camera exploded, freezing the moment in brilliant, blinding light, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I forced my legs to move across the deck, past the clusters of family members laughing and jostling for position. The photographer clapped his hands for attention. "Okay, everyone, let's get you organized." Big smiles. I stood a few feet back, half hidden in the shadow of a hanging string of fairy lights, a silent question mark. Waiting for some acknowledgement. A wave, a gesture that would signal I belonged, that I should squeeze into the frame and claim my sliver of belonging. The photographer scanned the group, his brow furrowed slightly. Is this everyone? For a heart-stopping beat, there was a pause. A palpable flicker of hesitation in the air. I watched Darlene glance across the deck, her eyes landing on me for a fleeting second. She knew I was there. She saw me, and then she offered that tight, brittle smile she reserved for public appearances for saving face. She turned back to the photographer, her voice bright and unwavering. Yes, she said smoothly, patting down the front of her dress. This is everyone. The photographer nodded, oblivious to the silent erasure unfolding before him. He lifted the camera to his eye. On 3, no one objected. No one even turned to look for me. Not Ashton basking in the golden glow of his birthday, not Dad. A shadowy figure on the periphery. Not a single relative whose names I had diligently memorized my entire life, whose birthdays I had never once missed. The shutter clicked, capturing the perfect family moment, a carefully constructed lie with a gaping hole where I should have been. I stood there frozen, halfway between existence and utter obliteration, the air thick and unbreathable around me. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was deliberate. I wasn't missing by mistake. I was missing by design. I pressed my fingertips against the rough wood of the railing, a desperate anchor in the swirling vortex of my emotions. A ripple of forced laughter and applause followed the flash. From a distance, the photo would look flawless. Smiling faces, arms linked, a seamless tapestry of belonging. No one would ever know there had been someone standing just out of frame, someone erased with nothing more than a polite smile and a well-timed lie. I swallowed the jagged lump forming in my throat and shifted back another step further into the encroaching shadows. The deck lights cast long golden beams across the ground, and I watched my own silhouette blur into the background, just another trick of the light, just another detail no one would bother noticing. In that moment, something inside me went still. Not broken, not shattered, but hollowed like a bell, stripped of its resonant voice. They didn't forget me. They didn't overlook me. They chose not to see me. And standing there under the artificial glow of the fairy lights and the hollow echo of their forced laughter, I understood something with a cold crystal clarity. This wasn't my family. Not anymore. Maybe it never had been. The applause died down, and Darlene was already herding people toward the next staged event: cake, drinks. Whatever ritual they needed to further crown Ashton's self-proclaimed reign. I turned away before anyone could catch the raw pain etched on my face, moving through the scattered crowd, like a ghost in my own life. Inside the house felt too bright, too warm, a mocking contrast to the cavernous emptiness opening in my chest. I headed for the kitchen, a desperate need for a moment of solitude washing over me, a place to gather the rapidly disintegrating pieces of myself. But as I rounded the corner, I stopped cold. There, sitting squarely on the gleaming marble countertop, was something waiting for me. My stomach plummeted. It was a small white bakery box with a clear plastic window. Inside sat a single cupcake, slightly lopsided, its generic white frosting carelessly smudged along the top. No candle, no card, no note, just the solitary cupcake, forgotten, insignificant, and utterly alone, just like me. A laugh, sharp and humorless, escaped my throat before I could stifle it. I clapped a hand over my mouth, swallowing the bitter sound down a lifetime of learned suppression. I stared at the cupcake, the cheap grocery store kind you grabbed at the last minute as an afterthought. Not even homemade, not even picked out with a modicum of care. It was a pathetic echo of the life they had always offered me. A life of second choices, of not quite worth it. The sounds of the party drifted toward me again. The clinking of glasses, the rise and fall of comfortable voices. The easy, unburdened joy of people who had effortlessly chosen their belonging and just as effortlessly chosen to exclude me from it. I stood there, the lonely cupcake, a cruel centerpiece between us, and felt the burn of humiliation give way to something sharper, something more dangerous: rage. Not the loud, fiery kind that demanded immediate expression, no, this was quieter, deeper. A cold, coiled thing that had lived inside me longer than I dared to admit. I wasn't the one who was broken. They were the ones who couldn't see value beyond their own distorted reflections. They were the ones who mistook cruelty for tradition, favoritism, for love. I stepped back from the counter, my decision crystallizing in that instant. There would be no second chances this time. No patient waiting for them to miraculously realize their profound and consistent mistake. No desperate clinging to a seat at a table that had never truly been mine. To begin with, I turned away from their oblivious laughter and headed back inside, leaving the pathetic cupcake behind, a final silent testament to their indifference. The kitchen felt like a stage after the final curtain had fallen. Brightly lit, hollow, abandoned, I stood just inside the doorway, letting the heavy doors swing shut behind me with a muted click. Beyond the glass, the cacophony of laughter spilled across the deck, rising and falling like relentless waves against a shore I no longer had the strength to swim towards. Then Darlene's voice sliced through the muffled noise, sharp and falsely cheerful. "Oh, almost forgot, we got you something." Her heels clicked sharply against the cold marble as she crossed the kitchen, a small half-crumpled envelope dangling from her fingertips, like a discarded afterthought. She offered a quick, tight smile, her eyes already flitting away, and thrust the envelope into my hand without a second glance. "There you go, honey," she said, her tone dismissive, like handing me a paper napkin at a casual barbecue. I looked down at the envelope. It was light, too. Light, a mere whisper of something that barely existed, with numb fingers. I slipped the flimsy card free, cheap cardstock. A generic printed design. No weight, no warmth. Across the front, metallic letters spelled out 2 words that gleamed dully under the harsh fluorescent lights. Maybe next year. No note inside, no signature, no hastily scribbled message squeezed into a corner. Just emptiness, the words blurred for a disorienting second. Not from tears, but from the sudden brutal clarity pressing down on me. Maybe next year they'd remember me. Maybe next year I'd matter. Maybe next year they'd pretend better. Maybe never. I turned the card over as if hoping some secret message had been tucked between the folds. There was nothing. Just the cold, impersonal indifference of a mass-produced apology for a love that had never truly existed. Behind me, the party swelled, a relentless chorus of laughter and clinking glasses, the easy, self-absorbed noise of people celebrating themselves. It didn't matter if I stayed here another hour, another year, another decade. It would always be like this. They weren't careless, they were deliberate. They wanted me small, invisible, manageable. A fierce, rebellious part of me wanted to slam the pathetic card onto the countertop to make the flimsy sound echo off the cold marble and shatter the brittle pretense that still hung heavy in the air like smoke. But I didn't. Instead, with a strange detached calm, I slid the card carefully back into its envelope, as if packing away something toxic, and tucked it into the pocket of my jeans. The sharp corner dug insistently into my hip. With every breath, I took a constant physical reminder of the invisible wounds they inflicted. I picked up my car keys from where I'd left them by the fruit bowl earlier, the cool metal a solid, grounding presence in my trembling hand, something I could still trust. I crossed the kitchen slowly, deliberately, not rushing, not making a scene. I moved through the house like a ghost, invisible even to the people who had spent a lifetime pretending they couldn't see me. Nobody looked up. Nobody called my name. I reached the front door, my hand hovering over the cold knob. One last chance, I thought, a desperate, foolish plea to the universe. One last chance for someone, anyone, to notice my silent departure. Nothing, only the dull roar of a party I had never truly been a part of. I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air slapped me awake with its clean-cutting honesty, and needles whispered underfoot as I walked across the gravel. The crunching sound a stark counterpoint to the muffled revelry behind me. When I slid behind the wheel of my car, the familiar scent of leather and the comforting creak of the seat beneath me were a small solace. The headlights cut a clean, decisive path through the darkness as the engine rumbled to life. I sat there for a breath longer than necessary, the cheap envelope burning against my hip like a brand. Maybe next year, maybe never. The steering wheel felt right in my hands, more real, more tangible than any forced handshake, any hollow hug, any brittle smile I had been offered tonight. I pulled out slowly, letting the tires churn the gravel, a small act of rebellion. The trees swallowed the lake house behind me until it was nothing but a fading memory. dissolving into the misty darkness. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my heart didn't twist with longing as I drove away. Instead, it unfurled, stretched towards something vast and unknown, something terrifying and beautiful. Freedom. I wasn't running away. I was running toward myself. I tucked the car into drive, pressed my foot on the gas, and didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that settled deep in my bones. I didn't speed away in some dramatic escape scene from a movie. I drove slowly, deliberately, letting each turn of the tires on the gravel whisper a goodbye. I wasn't willing to speak aloud. The road curled away from the lake house, climbing higher into the silent, watchful hills. The trees leaned in on either side, tall and imposing, bearing silent witness to the profound shift unraveling inside me. Somewhere between the bend and the ridge, the crushing weight in my chest began to transform. It didn't disappear, didn't magically lighten, but it shifted, solidifying into something akin to resolve. Like a hand finally unclenching after years of holding on too tightly. I spotted a scenic overlook just ahead, a jagged cutout in the hillside, offering a panoramic view of Trillium Lake, now a vast expanse of black. Still water under the heavy blanket of night. I pulled over and killed the engine, letting the profound quiet seep in a balm to my wounded spirit. For a long moment, I simply sat there breathing, feeling, letting the silence fill the void, where all the noise and manufactured joy had been. Then, almost without conscious thought, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. The lock screen glowed in the darkness, casting my face in a cold, pale light. I thumbed through my gallery until I found the photo I had taken earlier, almost subconsciously, never fully realizing its significance. At the time, the solitary cupcake, that sad, sagging grocery store cupcake, sitting forlornly on a flimsy paper plate on the far corner of the gleaming marble counter. I had snapped it in a moment of bitter humor, never intending to do anything with it. But now I opened Instagram. For a fleeting second, my finger hovered over the post button. Posting anything felt risky, childish, even perhaps petty. But this wasn't about them anymore. It was about drawing a line, a visible demarcation they could no longer casually erase or step over without consequence. I uploaded the photo, no filters, no fancy edits. Just the stark reality of the slightly wilted cupcake under the harsh glare of the kitchen lights. In the caption box I typed, "Celebrating peace this year, no chef needed, simple, clean, true." I hit post before I could overthink it, before the insidious voice of self-doubt could creep in. The image blinked onto my feed and disappeared into the vast sea of curated perfection and manufactured happiness. But it was there. It was real. It was mine. I tucked the phone into my lap and leaned back against the headrest, staring up at the countless stars scattered across the inky black canvas of the night sky. At first, there was only the profound silence of the mountains. Then the soft buzz of a notification broke the stillness. Then another and another. Curious, I picked up the phone again, likes, comments. Not from strangers, not from random followers, but from cousins I hadn't seen in years, from old friends who had long ago drifted out of my life. Not because of distance, but because of how small I had allowed myself to become, desperately trying to fit into a family that had never truly made space for me. "Been there," one comment read. "Proud of you," said another. Little green hearts and quiet affirmations bloomed across my screen, subtle but unmistakable. Support, recognition, understanding. I smiled, not a wide, triumphant grin, but something quieter, something steadier, a genuine warmth spreading through the cold ache in my chest. For once, I didn't feel exposed or ashamed for speaking my truth, for acknowledging the pain. I didn't feel like I had lit a match just to watch everything burn. I felt like I had finally drawn a boundary, and for the first time in my life, I was prepared to stand firmly behind it. They hadn't burned the bridge tonight. They had been systematically demolishing it for years, with every casual cut, every dismissive slight, every cheap card, every hollow glance. All I had done was finally choose not to rebuild it. My hand, still gripping the phone, no longer shook. The tight knot in my stomach unraveled a little more, thread by fragile thread. I wasn't angry, not in the loud, explosive way I had once imagined reclaiming myself would feel. I was just free. Almost. I set the phone on the passenger seat, feeling the gentle hum of new notifications vibrating against the leather. The view beyond the guardrails shimmered faintly under the moonlight. The lake was just a dark mirror now, reflecting a sky too vast to contain. I exhaled slowly, savoring the profound stillness, the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Just as I closed my eyes to breathe it all in, another buzz jerked my attention back. A notification, different this time. A new post from them, the family account Darlene ran with the precision of a polished PR campaign. Curious, despite myself, I opened it. What I saw hit me harder than I expected. A photo of Ashton at the party, his face flushed with forced merriment. Laughing under the garish fairy lights surrounded by a carefully curated collection of smiling faces. A caption gleamed underneath. Family is everything, grateful for real loyalty tonight. Real loyalty. The word is twisted like a subtle vicious blade calculated to wound. It wasn't just a post. It was a shot fired directly across my bow. I set the phone down slowly, a tremor returning to my fingers. They weren't done, and neither was I. Leaned back against the headrest, breathing deeply, trying to savor the fragile moment of peace that had finally settled over me. My phone lay face down on the passenger seat, the world momentarily muted behind a layer of glass and metal. It didn't last. The insistent vibration rattled the seat beside me, a buzz that felt sharper, more urgent than the others. I picked it up without thinking, my thumb unlocking the screen with a practiced swipe. The notification hit me like a physical blow to the gut. New post from Bundy Family Love. Against my better judgment, I tapped it open. There they were, Darlene Ashton and Merrick Arms, wrapped around each other in a grotesque parody of familial affection, grinning into the camera, as if the past few agonizing hours hadn't even occurred. Fairy lights twinkled insincerely overhead. The lake glimmered behind them like some cheap, mass-produced postcard, and the caption read, "True family stays strong, even when others walk away, #family first, #loyalty." My heart stuttered, skipped a painful beat, then crashed hard against my ribs. It was a clean gleaming bullet of a message, aimed squarely at me. I scrolled down to the comments, even though a sickening premonition already told me what I would find. "So sorry you're dealing with selfish people. Some kids just don't appreciate what they have. You're better off without toxic energy in your life." The words blurred on the screen, but I forced myself to keep reading, forced myself to absorb every carefully curated jab, every polished dagger disguised as sympathy. They were painting me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who had callously walked away from a family that had only ever loved her, and they weren't even trying to be subtle about it. Another ping. A new post this time from Ashton's personal account. I braced myself before opening it. Close-up selfie of him holding a champagne flute, the lake house lights twinkling in the background. His smile was easy, confident, his arms slung possessively around Darlene's shoulders like some loyal golden sun. The caption underneath, "Proud to step up when others turn their backs on the people who raised us, #family." I blinked once, twice. The words burned themselves into my mind, searing hot with betrayal. Turn their backs, abandoned, selfish. They weren't just throwing dirt at me. They were rewriting history, twisting the truth until the entire world would see me as nothing more than the bad seed, the problem child, the disappointment they had valiantly tried to overcome. And the worst part? People would believe it because they were smiling, because they were loud, because I had been quiet for too long. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and landed on the seat with a dull thud. My chest heaved once, twice, as the full weight of their calculated betrayal settled deep within me, heavy and suffocating. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, a desperate attempt to ground myself against the white-hot rage that threatened to spill over. They wanted a villain, fine. But I wasn't going to let them write my story. Not anymore. I sat there for a long, seething moment, the engine ticking softly as it cooled the woods outside the window, whispering like ancient ghosts. I wasn't crying, not yet. Not even close. I was furious. The kind of fury that doesn't burn out quickly but simmers steady and sharp, waiting for the precise moment to strike. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my jacket, not to dry tears, but to scrub away the last vestiges of the girl who would have swallowed this humiliation and begged for meager scraps of their conditional love. No more. They wanted to play dirty. I could do clean and still win. I picked up the phone again, my fingers steadier now, the initial shock giving way to a cold, unwavering resolve. I closed the social media apps, locking away their carefully constructed lies. I opened my notes instead. A blank page stared back at me, bright and waiting good. I needed somewhere to start drafting the plan. Forming in the quiet corners of my mind, a plan that didn't involve screaming matches or public meltdowns. I would fight back, but not on their terms. They had built their fragile empire on appearances, on curated images, and carefully constructed half-truths. I knew where the cracks were. I knew the real stories, hiding beneath those polished smiles. And this time, I wasn't interested in protecting anyone's fragile reputation but my own. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the raw anger settle into something heavier, something sharper, unwavering resolve. When I opened them again, I was already mapping it out. Step 1, get everything in writing. Step 2, shine a light in all the right places. Step 3, let the truth stark and undeniable do the work. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They had no idea how dangerous a woman could be when she finally decided she had absolutely nothing left to lose. I sat there in that small car, perched precariously above the black glinting expanse of the lake, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. I closed the notes app, wiped my face again, and began drafting a plan they wouldn't see coming. The night outside was a heavy velvet black. As I leaned back in my seat, the glow of my phone dimming with each passing second. For a moment, I let the profound quiet settle, let it wrap around me like a protective armor. The world outside the windshield was still indifferent, and for the first time in too long, I welcomed that silence. I had just begun drafting my plan, beginning the first true act of reclaiming myself when my phone buzzed again. A text this time. I hesitated before picking it up, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I already knew it wouldn't be good. It was from Darlene. A single photo, no words. My thumb trembled slightly more from the anticipation of yet another calculated betrayal than from actual fear as I clicked on it. The image filled the screen, my old bedroom, or what used to be my bedroom. Gone were the bookshelves, crammed with dog-eared novels, my faithful companions. Through countless lonely nights, gone was the twin bed with its threadbare quilt, a silent testament to the stubborn independence I refused to relinquish even after college. Gone was the small writing desk where I had stayed up late into countless nights, meticulously planning futures I had naively hoped my family might someday be proud of. In their place stood a brand new treadmill gleaming under the harsh overhead light. Where my dreams had once resided, now stood nothing more than a cold, impersonal exercise machine. Beneath the photo, a message followed almost as an afterthought. Didn't think you were coming back, figured we'd use the space. No apology, no kindness, just cold practical erasure wrapped in casual cruelty. I sat there, the phone slipping slightly in my grip, my heart pressing painfully against my ribs. It wasn't the repurposed room itself that caused the sharp ache. It was the chilling message beneath it all. You don't belong here anymore. Maybe you never did. I squeezed my eyes shut for a beat, grounding myself in the steady rhythm of my breathing, and out, wouldn't let them see me break. Even if they weren't here to witness it, I refused to fall apart because of them. Again. The next blow came swiftly, another insistent notification. Still staring numbly at the screen, I clicked back into the family's social media account. A full album had been uploaded, pictures from the party I had fled only hours before. Dozens of shots. Ashton grinning obnoxiously with various guests. Darlene raising a champagne glass mid-toast, her face a mask of forced gaiety. Cousins piled onto the dock, their faces flushed and giddy with alcohol and manufactured joy. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. I scrolled faster, a desperate, sickening dread churning in my stomach. One photo after another. Group shots, candids posed smiles. Tag after tag lighting up the pictures. Not a single one of me. I wasn't just erased from their memories of the day. I had been digitally deleted, as if I had never existed. As if I had never fought so desperately to belong. The hollow ache that opened up inside me wasn't even grief anymore. It was something colder, sharper, not mourning the loss of family, but mourning the shattered illusion I had clung to for far too long. You can't be erased if you were never truly seen. The thought echoed so clearly in the sudden silence of the car that it startled me. And once it landed, once it took root, it didn't move, didn't tremble, didn't ache. It simply was. I set the phone down on the passenger seat, the screen fading to black, like the closing curtain on a play that had run far too long. For a few moments, I just sat there staring at the empty road ahead, feeling the steady, calming pulse of certainty start to thrum within me. They had made their choices. Now it was unequivocally my turn. No sadness this time. No desperate need to explain or prove myself. No frantic grasping for a love that would never be offered freely. I was done speaking their language. I was finally going to tell my own story, and I wasn't going to apologize for a single painful word of it. With a steady hand, I picked up my laptop from the floor of the passenger seat, where it had slid during the drive. I opened a fresh document. The blank page blinked up at me, clean, ready, patient, exactly how I wanted it. I began typing, not a rant, not a defense, a declaration, a reclamation of everything they had tried to strip away from me paragraph by paragraph. I meticulously set the record straight. I didn't call names, I didn't point fingers, I simply told the truth, the real truth, the one they had spent years twisting out of shape. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until the muscles in my shoulders ached, until the inky black of night was slowly bleeding into the pale hues of early morning, and the sky outside began to lighten with the faintest hint of dawn. When I finally finished, I leaned back in my seat and stared at the words on the screen. It wasn't bitter, it wasn't fueled by uncontrolled rage. It was honest, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I had finally gotten them to see me, but because I no longer needed them to. I closed my laptop and leaned back ready to tell my story. In a voice they couldn't silence, the soft click of my laptop closing echoed in the quiet car. A small final sound that seemed to signal the end of one life, and the quiet, determined beginning of something entirely new. Weeks later, that quiet promise to myself had taken solid, tangible form. I stood in the middle of my new loft, sunlight pouring in through the giant windows, bathing the exposed brick walls in a warm, forgiving glow. Portland's vibrant Pearl District buzzed faintly beyond the glass. Distant conversations, the cheerful ping of bicycle bells, the low, steady hum of a city breathing at its own independent pace. The loft wasn't huge. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. Every single inch of it belonged to me. The polished concrete floors were still mostly bare, save for a comfortable second-hand couch I had snagged from a quirky vintage shop, a coffee table crafted from reclaimed wood, and a few framed photographs leaning casually against the wall, waiting for me to decide where they truly belonged. I exhaled slowly, feeling the persistent tension that had once been welded into my bones finally begin to lift. Piece by the fragile piece, today was my birthday. Not that anyone from the lake house would be calling, not that I expected a text, a card, or even an obligatory "Hope you're well" message tossed out into the echoing void. No, today was mine. I crossed the sun-drenched room to the small functional kitchen where a single cupcake waited patiently on the countertop. Vanilla frosting rainbow sprinkles, one bright pink candle stuck proudly in the center. I had picked it up from a little bakery down the street on impulse, on a whim, on a sudden unexpected wave of reckless tenderness toward myself. A kindness I had spent far too many years denying. I set the cupcake gently on a simple white plate, struck a match, and lit the tiny candle. The defiant flame danced in the late afternoon light, bright and unwavering. No sprawling lake house, no army of caterers, no forced staged family photos. Just me in a loft that still smelled faintly of fresh paint and the intoxicating scent of wild, untamed hope, standing in the warm sunshine. With a single imperfect cupcake, I smiled a real smile this time, small but certain, a genuine warmth spreading through me. "Happy birthday, Rowena," I whispered into the quiet stillness of my new beginning. "You are worth celebrating." The words didn't catch in my throat. They didn't feel like a lie. They felt solid, honest, undeniably mine. I sat down cross-legged on the bare floor, the plate balanced carefully in front of me, and watched the candle flicker. There was no rush, no expectant audience, no need for a performance, just me. And for the first time, it felt like enough. It struck me then with a quiet, profound clarity how much of my life I had spent desperately trying to fit into rooms that consistently shrank around me, endlessly striving to earn a love that was always dangled just out of reach, like some cruel, unattainable prize. How much of my existence had been shaped by waiting for permission to simply be, to exist fully and without apology. And now I wasn't waiting anymore. The family that had so callously erased me, the voices that had relentlessly tried to rewrite my narrative, the ones who twisted my absence into a weapon to wield against me, they no longer held the pen. I did. I thought of the empty bedroom back at the lake house, now a sterile testament to my perceived disposability. I thought of the digital party album, my name conspicuously missing a gaping void in their carefully constructed reality. I thought of the way their laughter had washed over my absence without missing a single self-satisfied beat. I thought of the countless times I had swallowed their pain. Let it settle in my chest like a heavy, inevitable stone. Not anymore. Their choice to exclude me was never a reflection of my worth. It never had been. I wasn't broken because they failed to love me, and I wasn't lesser because they chose to leave me behind. Healing wasn't linear. I understood that now. There would still be days when the old ache would creep in, when the hurtful memories would surface like unexpected bruises I had almost forgotten. There would still be lonely nights when the weight of it all might feel momentarily overwhelming. But even on those nights, even in those fragile moments, I would never again shrink myself to fit into spaces too small for my heart. I had finally outgrown the desperate need for their approval. I had chosen myself. A quiet wave of gratitude swelled in my chest, not for them, but for the resilient girl who had somehow survived them, for the woman who had painstakingly risen. Piece by stubborn piece, scarred but undeniably radiant out of the emotional rubble they had so carelessly left behind. I leaned forward slightly, bringing my face closer to the flickering candle. No desperate wishes this year. No frantic pleas tossed into the echoing void, hoping for meager scraps of kindness. Just a quiet, unwavering certainty. I closed my eyes, drew in a slow, steady breath, and gently blew out the candle. The tiny flame sputtered and disappeared, leaving behind a thin curl of smoke that twisted into the sunlit air like a final silent prayer. I closed my eyes, blew out the candle, and finally quietly claimed my rightful place in the world. No permission needed. Sometimes the hardest, most valuable lesson we learn is that not every family will choose us no matter how fiercely we love them. But true peace isn't found in endlessly chasing what consistently wounds us. It's found in the courageous act of choosing ourselves. If you've ever navigated the treacherous terrain of family drama like Rowena, please remember this: you are unequivocally not alone, and your inherent worth is never ever measured by someone else's inability to accept and cherish you. What would you have done in Rowena's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful journeys of resilience and self-discovery. See you in the next story.